China's economic rise is often attributed to its blockbuster manufacturing industry. They came to build the products necessary for the world, everything from electronics to clothing, furniture to toys. By offering cheap labor, fast production, and an ever-improving infrastructure, China became the world's factory. There is one striking feature that many believe has fueled China's economic rise and would propel it to even greater heights, and that is intellectual property theft. For many years, China has been accused of stealing designs, technology, and trade secrets from companies around the world, especially from the United States, Europe, and Japan. For instance, back in 2009, the United States International Trade Commission, USITC, conducted a major survey to understand the scale of losses caused by intellectual property rights, IPR, infringement in China. The findings were staggering. According to the report, US firms in the IP-intensive sectors of the economy suffered losses of approximately $48 billion due to IPR violations in China. These losses included not only lost sales and profits, but also royalties, licensing fees, and damage to brand reputation. In addition to this, these firms spent around $4.8 billion just trying to combat or address these infringements. Then by mid-2010s, various estimates, such as those cited in USTR Section 301 reports and studies by independent organizations, pointed toward a dramatic increase in losses, with some analyses placing annual losses on US firms between $225 billion and $600 billion for more recent years, such as in 2017 and 2019. These aren't small amounts of money, and indeed some have coined this as the greatest transfer of wealth in history. But just how does this work? How does China actually steal hundreds of billions of dollars from the United States or from other Western economies? Well, to understand this, let's talk about the various mechanisms of China's intellectual property theft. One of the most infamous examples of China's intellectual property theft is traced back to what is known as joint ventures and market access. A hallmark of China's approach to technology acquisition has been its insistence that foreign companies engage in joint ventures with local firms. This practice was often a precondition for entering the Chinese market. Companies that complied with these rules were required to share their technological know-how with their Chinese partners. Over time, this forced transfer of knowledge helped Chinese companies build domestic capabilities, often at significantly lower development costs, resulting in a direct wealth transfer. One famous example is DuPont, a company known for its pioneering role in developing advanced chemical processes, most notably its patented chloride route process for producing titanium dioxide, the vibrant white pigment used in everything from paints and plastics to the filling in Oreo cookies. DuPont's problem with China started in the early 2000s, when it discovered that one of its former Chinese employees had stolen trade secrets related to its proprietary process for producing titanium dioxide. The employee later passed these secrets to Chinese companies, including a state-owned firm, which then used the information to build rival operations. This was not a case of ordinary market competition. It was a deliberate and well-organized effort to replicate DuPont's decades of research and development in a fraction of the time and cost. Eventually, this led to DuPont losing significant market share and billions of dollars in potential revenue, as the Chinese companies gained global competitiveness using stolen technology. Secondly, China is also notorious for counterfeit goods, where the theft of trademarks and designs results in billions of dollars in lost revenue every year. Although many cases involve low-value consumer goods, the cumulative effect on global brands is significant. One infamous example here is no other than Huawei. Huawei is a company many have now heard of after its meteoric rise in the global telecommunications sector and its controversial role in US-China tensions. What most people don't realize is that Huawei's success story is deeply intertwined with China's approach to intellectual property acquisition. sometimes through legal licensing, but often through tactics that fall into grey or outright illegal territory. For example, a case back in 2003 to 2004 involved Cisco. Cisco accused Huawei of illegally copying source code and product designs, leading to a settlement where Huawei admitted to some degree of plagiarism. Although the case was quietly settled, it is frequently cited as an example of systematic IP theft. Today, if we compare Cisco and Huawei side by side, we get to see that Huawei has caught up massively to Cisco. As a matter of fact, as you can see in the graph, the revenues of Huawei as of 2024 is more than double than that of Cisco. That's a shocking difference, considering that Huawei, 2 decades ago, was very far below that of Cisco. And it is important to know that this wasn't the first time Huawei was accused of IP theft. Motorola, in the early 2000s, also accused Huawei of misappropriating its wireless technology. Then, there's T-Mobile's Tappy robot case. Between 2012 and 2013, Huawei employees were found to have stolen parts and information related to T-Mobile's phone testing robot, Tappy. T-Mobile sued Huawei in 2014, and in 2017, a jury awarded T-Mobile $4.8 million for breach of contract, though it did not find Huawei liable for trade secret misappropriation. There's much more cases out there involving accusations on Huawei. What this all points to is that there is a possibility that Huawei's rise to global prominence was not solely driven by innovation and hard work, but also by a strategic pattern of acquiring, imitating, and sometimes outright stealing intellectual property from foreign companies. Now, let's talk about why some coin this as the greatest transfer of wealth in history. What does this really mean? To understand what it is important to understand the context. The context refers to a shift in economic value from innovative, research-driven companies in the West to Chinese companies that thrive on imitation and forced technology transfer. For instance, if we graph out the gross domestic expenditures on R&D of the United States, we get to see that they spend a massive amount of money into research and development every single year. In 2021, the expenditure reached a massive $806 billion, which is big enough to even surpass many major economies' GDP. The problem of wealth transfer, however, happens when US firm spends billions on research and development. For instance, Micron, which if we graph out their R&D spending per year, we get to see that they spend a lot on research and development. And the problem arises when that very innovation, the products, the semiconductors and networks that Micron develops, is repackaged by a Chinese firm that generates similar revenue at a fraction of the cost. The wealth generated by that R&D does not remain with the original innovator. Instead, it flows to the Chinese firm and, by extension, to the Chinese state and its broader economy. To put it simply, the original innovator carries the cost, but the imitator reaps the profits. This is the crux of the greatest transfer of wealth in modern history. When companies like Micron, Intel, or Nvidia pour billions into designing next-generation chips, software, and manufacturing processes, the value lies not only in the final product, but in the knowledge, trial and error, and breakthroughs accumulated over time. However, when a Chinese firm, sometimes backed by the state, acquires that knowledge through legal loopholes, joint ventures, or even covert theft, they bypass the expensive, high-risk phase of R&D. They skip the learning curve, cut down on costs, and go straight to monetization. This is one of the reasons why Donald Trump has imposed tariffs on China. In 2020, President Trump said that protecting the innovations, creations, and inventions that power our country are vital to our economic prosperity and national security. That quote stems from an official White House briefing published on September 21, 2020, titled, "President Donald J. Trump is Protecting America. From China's Efforts to Steal Technology and Intellectual Property." In the briefing, the Trump administration laid out its justification for a sweeping set of actions aimed at combating what it called China's exploitation of the open US economy. The report highlighted a long-standing pattern of behavior by China that included state-sponsored industrial espionage, coercive trade practices, forced technology transfers, and cyber intrusions into US commercial networks. So, as you can see by some observers, it is indeed the greatest transfer of wealth in history. But anyway, do let us know what you think. Thanks for watching.